Welcome back. Welcome to part two of The Problem is Never the Problem. How to find the opportunity in the obstacle and the blessing in the bullshit. So this would be part two. This would be the part about finding the blessing in the bullshit. And, if you have a hard time with that word, get over it. Get over it. It's just a word. And I remember I used to have a problem with the word God. Um, in fact, it was a big problem that I had with the word God. If you ever said that word to me, I would get angry and I would turn around and walk away from you and I would refuse to talk to you again. So one day, the day my whole life changed, I heard Mary Mann and Morrissey, of course, because she's my hero. Um, I heard her say, she was talking about spirit. She was talking about higher power. She was talking about source energy. She was talking about the allness of all, infinite intelligence. She was talking about God. And I heard her say, don't let the word get in your way of understanding what I'm talking about. And that caught my attention because if she hadn't said that, I would have let the word get in the way. I would have let it stop me from hearing what she had to say, and my life would not have changed. So I'm just saying now, it was a good title. It's a good title for this program. So if you have a hard time with the word bullshit, deal with it, but don't let it stop you from hearing the blessing in this program. Don't let it stop you from hearing what's in this for you. This would be really good practice. It's a pretty commonplace word nowadays, but some people still have a hard time with it. It is a cuss word. Yes, it's a curse word. Sorry, um, but not really, because it caught your attention, didn't it? So, how do you find the blessing in something like that? Well, the blessing in this would be to just relax and let it be what it is. Um, I'm I can remember when I was okay. I learned how to read when I was 3 years old. I started writing when I was in the sixth grade. Um, my sixth grade teacher, Mr. Powell, said to me, "You should become a writer when you grow up because you have talent." And I had never considered that before because I grew up believing that I would never be good at anything and that I would never be successful at anything and that, I would never do anything that anybody would approve of. These are things that I just knew about myself. And he said that to me and it caught my attention because when he said it, I did realize that I enjoy writing. I like to write. I started writing poetry and I would write essays and I would do some journaling, and so I started writing at the age of about I was 12 years old. I was in the sixth grade. That was when I started writing, was when he said that to me. And I I wrote a lot. I was prolific. I wrote a lot. I had stacks and piles of of things that I had written, both poetry, and I played the guitar and I wrote songs and I did a lot of writing and it was good. The stuff I wrote was good. And then when I was 18 years old, I was involved with a man who didn't like the fact that I wrote a lot and that I enjoyed it. And one day he took every single thing that I had ever written, I had it all together, and he threw it in the fireplace. And he destroyed all of it. And I hadn't memorized any of it because I had it written down. So everything I had ever written was lost. It was gone. And that was bullshit. Um, and when that happened, I set my pen down. I set my pen down, and I never wrote it. That was before computers. Thank you very much. Um, But I set my pen down and I never wrote another thing again because it was too painful. Because that was just the way my life was, and I was a victim, and that was just proof to me that I wasn't meant to be successful at anything, and that anything that I loved wasn't going to be important, and blah blah blah. It was just a validation of all the things I had learned about myself as a child being abused. And I was heartbroken. I was heartbroken, and I hated him for that. And I hated God, and I hated life, and my life hated me, and that was how I treated myself, and that was how I lived my life. So fast forward, and this is the story that I've told about this. Don't you hate him? I used to tell that story on purpose to make people hate him, and I'm so thankful that I don't do that anymore, because I don't want anybody to hate him. I want him to be happy. But up until so fast forward 20 years. I didn't write anything for 20 years. And then I left Portland when I was 35, and I still didn't write anything. I didn't start writing again until 3 years later, when I was 38, when a poem just sort of like fell out of my fingertips, and it was good. And I remembered, oh yeah, I like to write, and I let myself believe that I could, and it was cool. So I started writing again, and I wrote poems, and I have 2 books published, and I allowed myself to enjoy it, and I allowed myself to believe that it was good, and that it was good that I was writing, and that I could be successful at it, and all that stuff, and I had become a very positive person. So this was great. And then, so that was I don't know, 6 years ago. No, it was 8 years ago. So a couple of years ago, I was on my way into Phoenix from my house, and I was going to an event where I knew I was going to be asked the question, how long have you been writing? And I was tired of telling that story. I don't want to tell that story anymore. I don't want to tell a story that is meant to make people feel bad about another person. Because that was the story that I told. That story was meant to make people hate him. It was meant to make people hate him and feel sorry for me. Well, poor you. I'm so sorry that happened to you. No, 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 no. I don't want to tell that story anymore. So I had been saying to people for probably 8 months before this that there's no such thing as a blessing in disguise. Blessings don't disguise themselves. How can a blessing disguise itself? There's no such thing as a blessing in disguise. Blessings lay right out in the open, waiting for us to look for them. And the second we do, we find them. If we're sincerely looking for the blessing, we will always be able to find it right there in the open. So I had been saying that to people for about 8 months. When I'm driving into Phoenix on my way to this event, and I'm deciding I don't want to tell that story anymore, and I know they're going to ask. So what's another way I can tell this story? Well, I don't know. Okay, so you've been telling people for however many months now that there's no such thing as a blessing in disguise, and that we can find the blessing in anything if we will just choose to look for it. What's the blessing in this? And it was amazing. The second I asked myself that question, I saw what the blessing was. I saw what the blessing was. It was so cool. It's still cool. Because if he hadn't done that, I would have continued writing. And everything that I had written, okay, I don't know how much you know about how the mind works, but when, we can visualize, which we do all day long, every day. People think in pictures. We think in pictures. What we're picturing, whether we're picturing something negative or something positive, whatever we're picturing is eventually going to come to pass if we give it enough energy, okay? Well, if we write it down, that's even more powerful. That's even more powerful. It's, I don't know, I don't, I think it's like 80, makes it 85% more powerful or something like that. It's a big number. So there I was living a life of hell, and there I was writing about poor pitiful me. Every poem I had written up to that point was about what a victim I was. Love is blind, so I must be. I don't see the things he's doing to me. Blah. Um, so that's the kind of stuff, that's the stacks of paper that he threw in the fireplace, the notebooks were filled with stuff like that. All this negative garbage about how bad my life was and what a victim I was and how sorry I felt for myself. Um, it all went up in smoke. And I didn't write again after that. And if I had, I would have continued writing about the pain in my life. The pain and the sorrow and the guilt and the shame and the poor pitiful me. I would have continued writing about that stuff. And that would have been icky. So here I am 20 some years later, and I'm looking back and looking for the blessing in this, and holy crap, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that he threw all that stuff in the fireplace and that it went up in smoke, because I didn't write anything again until after I had been living a very incredibly positive life for 3 years. I had been in Arizona for 3 years. I had been, from the time I climbed on the Greyhound bus on June 26th of the year 2000 till June of 2003, which is when that poem happened. It was 3 years that I had been living a very positive, amazingly wonderful life. Okay, so this poem that fell out of my fingertips that day was a very positive poem, and everything I've written since then has been really positive. And I know for a fact, because I know how the mind works, that if I had continued writing the negativity that I had written up to the point that all that stuff got thrown in the fireplace, I'd be dead. There's no question. I would never have, my life would have gotten worse and worse and worse and spiraled down and down and down until I would have, died at the hands of another person or committed suicide. There's no question. There is no question about that. So there's the blessing in the bullshit. It's bullshit that he threw that stuff in the fireplace. It's bullshit that he, people used to say that all the time when I would tell that story. Oh, that's bullshit. That's such bullshit that somebody would do that to another person. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for the bullshit. I'm so grateful. There's a huge blessing in that. And what about more recently? Oh yeah, that last abusive relationship I was in. Okay, so the throwing my writing in the fire happened when I was 18. And I lived another however many years that is, being abused by different people, having different ugly, nasty, horrible experiences, painful experiences. And then I was in that last abusive relationship that I ran from, and that one was ugly. I was going to die at his hands. He was going to kill me. There was no question. And I came across Mary Mann Morrissey. I swear, that woman, the work, she did not make a difference in my life. But my choice to apply the stuff I learned from her is what made the difference in my life. My application of the things that I learned from her is what changed my life. One of the very first things that I learned from her, I heard her say a quote from A Course in Miracles, and that was, "Peace begins with me, and I can choose peace instead of this. I can choose peace instead of this." And I started applying that in September of 1999. I started applying that in my life, in the midst of the abuse. Okay? He's not responsible for my peace. That was the conclusion I came to. He can't, it's not possible for him to be responsible for my peace. My own peace begins with me, and I can always choose peace, no matter what's going on in my circumstances. Okay? So I made it my choice to focus there in that relationship. Um, and he gave me lots of opportunity to practice that. He gave me lots of opportunity to practice. Peace begins with me. I can choose peace instead of this. I don't have to go here with him. I broke my buttons. I own, if you have buttons, have you ever said, "Oh, that person pushes my buttons. He knows how to push my buttons. She knows how to push my buttons." Well, guess what? You own your own buttons. You own your own buttons. Short circuit the dang things. Short circuit your buttons. You don't have to react just because they push your buttons. You your buttons are your buttons. I decided that. I own my own buttons. I can deactivate my buttons. I broke them. I took a hammer to them in my imagination. and it worked. It took practice. It took lots of practice. I wasn't very good at it at first. In fact, I would forget that, the whole domestic violence scenario would happen, and I would forget all about it. And then I would get mad at myself because I forgot. Oh, dang it, I was going to choose peace. I forgot. Shit. But I continued. How much do you want what you say you want? This is a big question. How much did I want what I say I wanted? I wanted it enough to do the work. I wanted it enough to practice. I wanted it enough to remind myself. I wanted it enough to do the work. So I practiced, as opportunity showed up, I practiced and I practiced and I practiced choosing peace. And I practiced saying, "Thank you, universe, for this opportunity to practice." And that is one way to find the blessing in the bullshit. Because ask anybody who's ever been abused. It's bullshit. It's bullshit to have somebody else treat you that way. It's bullshit to have somebody else say, "You're too ugly to be seen in public with me," or "I know you're screwing around, even though, you're never out of my sight. I know you're screwing around behind my back." Whatever. You name it. If it's abusive, it's bullshit. But there is a blessing available. There is a blessing available in anything like that. I don't care what the circumstance is. I don't care what the other person is doing. The other person is not the problem. He was not my problem. It was what I was thinking about him that was my problem. Okay? And I made a choice to start thinking differently about the whole thing. So what am I thinking about him? Oh yeah, that's right. You don't have the power to take my peace. No matter what, you can hit me all you want, but I can still feel peaceful on the inside. And it was amazing. He got more violent and it got worse. But I felt better and I felt stronger and I felt more powerful. And if it wasn't for that whole experience, I would have died. If I hadn't, if that whole thing hadn't happened the way it happened, I would have died. I would have been dead before the age of 40. And I am now 46, and I am very happy to be 46 years old, because that is 6 more years than I expected to be able to have. So I love my birthday. I love getting older, because and there's an example right there. A lot of people resist getting older. No, I'm happy to be getting older because I didn't expect to live this long. I didn't ask anybody who's survived cancer with a good attitude, and they'll say the same thing. Cancer, whatever. Every birthday is a gift. They've started coming out with commercials about that now. Happy birthday commercials to people who've survived cancer. Every birthday is a gift. And I feel the same way. I did not end up being a statistic. I did not end up being a statistic. I chose not to be a statistic. I chose peace. And I became a stronger person in the midst of that. And it was amazing. So, fast forward to now. That was 11 years ago, 12 years ago. Um, and I recently had this same experience with another person that I have to interact with on a daily basis. This person does not like me. He does not like me. No, it's not my husband. My husband loves me, and he's very good to me. But this other person does not like me. And he deliberately, well, not deliberately, well, maybe deliberately. That's, I guess, the best way to say it. I don't think, okay, not consciously. He's not consciously doing this, but he expects to see the worst in me. And when you expect to see the worst in another person, you're gonna see the worst. You're gonna see the things you don't like. He expects to see things in me, in things I do or things I say or actions I take or actions I don't take or whatever. He expects it to be bad. And that's what he sees. No matter how much, this is why it's not possible to please another person. You can't please another person. If they're expecting to see the worst in you, they're going to find it no matter what you do. So if you've ever experienced walking on eggshells with somebody, that's what it's been like with this particular person. For a while I was walking on eggshells going, do I do this or do I not do this? Because either way it's going to be wrong. Either thing that I do, if I do it the way I think he wants it done, it's going to be wrong. If I do it the way if I do the opposite, it's going to be wrong. No matter what I do, it's going to be wrong. And that has been really uncomfortable. And I got triggered in it. And for a few weeks there, it was like being back in a domestic violence relationship. Every time I was around this person, I was walking on eggshells, going, what am I going to do wrong next? And, when you focus on that, guess what you create? So it finally ended in, well, it hasn't ended, but my part in it has ended because I decided to find the blessing in the bullshit. It's bullshit to be treated like that. But we ended up having a confrontation in which it became clear to me, like I wrote a book called Pop Your Paradigm. A paradigm is another word for subconscious programming. It's another word for limiting belief. In this conversation, it wasn't a conversation, it was a confrontation. It was ugly. I could clearly see that this man was triggered. He was triggered. And there was no way, because I got defensive. He attacked me verbally, and I was defending myself. And everything I said, he couldn't hear it. He couldn't. In fact, his responses to the things that I was saying it was complete nonsense. It didn't even make sense because his responses to what I was saying had nothing to do with what I was saying. And I'm so grateful for that because it was so clear to me that his subconscious programming was not going to allow him to see anything good in me. And you know what? I'm not responsible for that. Oh my God, what a relief. I can choose peace. I can choose peace instead of this. I'm not responsible for making him happy. I'm not responsible for pleasing him. And guess what? He's not responsible for how I feel either. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to practice. And that was, I've gone, because my husband Rick and I have a very healthy relationship. We don't have confrontations and altercations and ugliness. There is no ugliness in our relationship. So I've had 11 peaceful years with this man, and then all of a sudden here's this with this man, my husband, this man, and then all of a sudden here I am with some, in close proximity with a person who does not like me. Um, and I don't think that's a conscious thing. I think it's a subconscious thing. Something in him is triggered by me, and I can have so much compassion for that. There's the blessing. There's the blessing in the bullshit. I get to practice compassion, and I feel wonderful even in the midst of that whole thing. I don't have to let my programming be triggered because his programming is triggered, and that's a powerful place to stand. I can stand in peace and have compassion for this person who's in pain. He's in pain. There's no other way to say it. If you're around somebody who's triggered, one thing that you can know for sure is that whether they know it or not, they're in pain. And that was wonderful. Peace begins with me. I can choose peace instead of this. That was a giant blessing, because I was able to and am able to be true to myself. Because for a while there, I turned back into a people pleaser. I was trying to please this person, and knowing that there's nothing I can do that's going to please him, but I was still trying. Now, I don't feel that pressure, and I don't feel the anxiety around that. I just feel compassion for the person, and that's my choice. Because I could look at it very differently, and I had to ask myself, what is it that I'm thinking about him that's making me feel this way? Because the day of the altercation I was in hell. I was in hell that day. The confrontation ended because I recognized his triggered programming, but I didn't feel any better. I still was feeling bad, and my imagination still kept. You know what worry is? It's creating a problem where only a potential problem exists. And this is a person that has some power in my life. And if I don't please him, he could do things that would make my life painful. And so after the confrontation, I still had some work to do. I still had some work to do, because you know how when you are in a relationship with somebody and you don't really get along, and you expect them to be a jerk, and they expect the same of you, and even when you're not even in the same building together, you have conversations with them in your imagination, and you plan the argument. And well, that's what I was doing. I left the house, and I went to the park, and my imagination ran away with me, and it was creating all these things about, well, what if this happens, and what if that happens, and what if what if, and what if, and what if, and I was fighting with the what if monster for a very long time. Well, it seemed like a very long time. It wasn't all that long. Because I've been doing this for a while, and I recognized that he's not doing anything to make me feel bad. He's not even here. He's not doing anything to make me feel this way. It's what I'm thinking about him. It's what I'm thinking about him that's making him my problem. So what is it that I'm thinking about him? And what would I rather be thinking about him? That was really the point when I decided to choose compassion. He's simply triggered. That's it. Something in me triggers something in him, and I don't have any control over that. But I do have control over how much peace I feel in my own life. And that's the blessing. That is the blessing that I was able to find in that particular bullshit. And I feel way more peaceful inside myself. I don't have a clue how he feels, because we hardly ever see each other. anymore, which is, okay. Um, but I had to recognize, what I was doing, and I had to recognize that I get to choose what I think about this. I get to choose how I feel about this. And I can choose to feel good. I can choose to find the blessing because I have tons of experience with this, because it's so fun to practice. And that's how I do this. That is how I practice this stuff. I make it fun. I make it into a game. Okay, whatever this circumstance is, does not feel good. Well, what's the blessing in it? And when I look for the blessing, when I deliberately look for the blessing, I always find it. I always find it. Usually, immediately. Not always, but the second I start looking for the blessing, I'm open to see the blessing. If I'm focused on the problem, I am not open to see the blessing. If I'm focused on this is bullshit, I'm not open to see any blessing. So I've made it my practice to deliberately look for the blessing, and I've made it a game. It's fun. And it works. It works beautifully. So where can you apply this in your life? Do you have some bullshit going on in your life? And what's the blessing in it? If you were to look for the blessing in it, what would that be? Would it be finding your own power in knowing that you can choose what you think about what you're considering the bullshit right now? You get to choose. You always get to choose what your thoughts are. And it's your thoughts about things that create your feelings about things. It's not the other way around. It's what I'm thinking about you that is making me feel this way. What I'm thinking about the problem is what's making me feel this way. What I'm thinking about my husband is what makes me feel that way about him. I love the man. He's adorable and he's hilarious. And I expect that from him, and I look for that in him. If I chose to look for problem in him, I'd find it. I'd find it. If I was looking for it, I'd find it. But I choose to look for how blessed I am to be in that relationship. I choose to look for how blessed I am in every aspect of my life, usually. Not always, but usually. And I feel very blessed that I know that I can always catch myself in the midst of when I'm not looking for the best in my life, and change it. What is it that I'm thinking that's making me feel this way? And what's a thought that feels better? So, I'm happy that you've joined me for this program. And I would love to hear from you about your thoughts. I would love to hear some examples of how you've applied this stuff in your life, because it's doable. This stuff is simple. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. And it really is simple. It's simple to apply. The hardest thing about it is remembering to do it. And I want to end this with just something that I learned a long time ago. And I have found it to be very powerful to remember for myself. And that is that circumstances are just circumstances. Circumstances are just circumstances. It's not even possible for a circumstance to have anything invested in how I feel about them. My circumstances are just circumstances. My circumstances, that which stands around me, has nothing invested in how I feel about it. It just is. And I get to choose. And it's my responsibility to choose. If I want my life to be good, I must choose what I think about my life. And the same goes for you. So there's always a blessing in whatever the bullshit is. There's always, and it all happens for a reason. You know, there's no such thing as bullshit without a blessing in it. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as an obstacle without an opportunity. There's no such thing as a problem without a solution. There's no such thing as a pile of bullshit without a blessing. And what you do with this information is completely up to you. And I hope that it's my hope that you have found something valuable in this that you can apply in your life right now to help yourself to feel better, to make a difference in your own life, because you're the only one who can. So, go find the blessing in the bullshit and the opportunity in the obstacle, and let me know what you think. Email me at sandra@chooseyouruniverse.com, and with your insights, with your complaints, with your suggestions, with your, I want to hear your story. I want to hear your story of how this stuff has worked for you. And just go love yourself. Love yourself enough to make the choice, to look for the opportunity, to look for the blessing, to choose peace, because you're the only one who can. So on that note, thank you for joining me, and have a nice, awesome, wonderful, fabulous day.